Okay, it is 3:30 somewhere, so I definitely want to maximize today's session. So, good afternoon, colleagues and friends. I am John Meduco. Pronouns are he, him, his, CT State President. Again, thank you for joining us. I know we have colleagues across all of our colleges and campuses and additional locations, and we are all busy. But I definitely appreciate you joining this impromptu webinar. Now, we did not give a lot of notice, but we felt that the topic at hand was very significant. So, today we're going to learn and share and assess the revised governance structure for CT State Community College. I want to maximize today's webinar in the QA segments, but it's really important for me to set the tone. I recently completed my tour of our colleges and facilities across the state, including New Britain. And I met and I listened and engaged with faculty, staff, students, administrators, foundation board members, and community partners. Um, I offered a platform for people to speak freely and for most of our colleagues across Connecticut to really let loose and speak their truth. At times, what I gleaned were feelings of pain, blunt feedback on the process of the consolidation of our 12 community colleges, feelings of exhaustion and frustration, anger and anguish. But there's also a willingness to give me or grant me the opportunity to do my research and intentionally take into account the concerns from many of you. As I finalize my 100-day report, which will highlight my visits, there were many common themes across our colleges and really across the state. One being shared governance. I have really been impressed and thankful for many of our college-based shared governance councils for submitting their respective resolutions on what they deem is necessary to stand up governance through the lens of their respective constituents. The resolutions varied from those that fully support the originally proposed governance structure and others that resoundingly opposed said structure and provided a alternative recommended version. What continues to amaze me is the genuine intent of all faculty and staff that simply desires CT State to get it right. For us to maintain the quality of our programs, disciplines, and instruction, for the voice of our professors, faculty, lecturers, and professional experts to be acknowledged, respected, and for them to serve as the stewards of what we ultimately teach to our students. As president, I believe the benefit of shared governance is that it taps into the knowledge, wisdom, experience of a variety of groups and people with the aim of sharing resources and identifying meaningful opportunities that help move the institution forward. Shared governance in our nation's colleges and universities has been around for more than a century. Principles of shared governance and even best practices for ensuring faculty had a voice in institution policy and curriculum were articulated as early as the 1920s. The American Association of University Professors first published a statement on shared governance between faculty, between administrators, and trustees. In their 2015 book, Locus Authority, The Evolution of Faculty Roles in Governance in Higher Education, Bowen and Tobin candidly and accurately, and at times, challenged the assessment of faculty governance. The authors asked two important questions. Does higher education have what it takes to reform effectively from within? And two, are the issues facing higher education today exacerbated by a century-old system of governance that desperately requires change? These authors also point out that much work and even more attention and scrutiny has to focus on the role of boards and presidents, while far less is looked at the role and place of faculty within the governance system. So these authors conclude that both the concept and the execution of faculty shared governance needs to be sharpened and redefined, and the consequences of failing to do so are more than the nation can afford. So since the pandemic across higher education, now we've seen it locally, we've seen with the colleagues and member institutions across the state and beyond. And in the years that have followed, there's been an urgency for reform, right? And the consequences of failing to do so have become much greater. I have asked our provost, Dr. Maya LaPierre-Dreger, to provide an overview of the revised governance structure. But please allow me to make this clear. Per my directive and my directive alone, that was driven by my college visits, right? Where I spent 10, 11, 12 hours on all of our campuses, really just hearing the honest truth from our faculty and staff. I charged her really to help facilitate and really initiate not only CT State's cabinet, but our academic leaders, our provost, our associate vice presidents, our school deans, to review the governance resolutions, to review the concerns expressed by faculty, but also to review the recommendations from our faculty and colleagues across our 12 and great legacy community colleges, and be committed to incorporating the many recommendations, the many proposed changes that we received. And again, I really thank our faculty for not only being willing to have the dialogue, right, to speak their truth, to advocate for their colleagues, not only on their respective college, but really for their colleagues across the state. Again, that gives me hope, right? That truly gives me hope because I mentioned this throughout my tours. We never had 12 broken colleges, right? We have 12 great colleges with great people, great faculty, great professionals. And it's my goal to build upon that. And our bread and butter at the core of what we're doing is teaching and learning. And our faculty, right, are stewards of our programs, our curriculum, our instruction. And they really drive the most important relationship that we're all responsible for protecting. And that's the faculty to student relationship. So again, really on behalf of my office, I really want to thank the faculty, right? I deem all faculty, all employees, all administrators as my counsel. All of you are counseling me to help me get this right and to ensure that we're putting our best foot forward. So, Dr. LaPierre-Dreger, I definitely want to pass the baton to you, and the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Meduco. I'm going to share my screen. And if you could just confirm whether or not you can see the screen, that would be great.
Yes, we can see it.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to walk everybody through the shared governance model, the revised model for shared governance, as Dr. Meduco explained. So let me first go through a brief overview and history of what brought us to this place. So first of all, what is shared governance? Taken from the BOR's governance award documentation, shared governance is defined as communication, collaboration, and mutual accountability between administration, faculty, staff, and students, which advances excellence in the operations of the various CSCU institutions. So a couple of questions just as starting point. So why statewide involvement and why campus involvement? Both are very important. The statewide involvement is important because we have a single accredited institution under NECHI, a single academic catalog with aligned programs, courses, and policies. And we want to ensure collaboration and representation across campuses for a variety of initiatives and issues that are statewide. But at the same time, we must retain campus identity and culture, ensure your local representation and perspective, and address needs of local communities. That's been heard loud and clear. So just a little bit of reminder, some of these slides you've seen in previous presentations related to governance. I just wanted to kind of bring them back just to remind folks. The legacy governance process on campuses, traditionally they vary, but campuses have some sort of curriculum body, some sort of Senate body. It flows through the campus president, CEO, and then up to the academic council. The transitional governance for CT State that was created, there were a variety of subcommittees under the SFA-SACC. The SFA is the Students First Academic and Student Affairs Consolidation Committee that was created for the transition, and then the CCIC, the College Consolidation Implementation Committee. And those things would then flow through the CT State Provost Council for BOR and then up to the BOR itself. So those bodies for transitional governance were sunset at the end of spring of 22. This is the CT State governance process that was approved. It was the diagram that we showed in the governance presentations that happened in the spring semester when we did webinars. And these were the ones that were approved through that previous process, through the governance work group, through the SFA-SACC, and then the CCIC after that. Likewise, this was the illustration that was used to show the flow of curriculum approval through the approval process. So I just want to take a moment and just to kind of remind folks the 4-year development process that took place to get here. And I know folks have differing opinions on how involved they were or how inclusive the process was. But just as a reminder, this has been happening for over 4 years leading up to where we are now in fall of 2022. So starting in spring of 18, where the work group was formed for shared governance, and throughout the academic year of 2019 into 2020, various models, all the campus models were looked at. In particular, the governance structures were examined on each campus, and throughout the process, there were multiple opportunities for feedback. There were public comment periods in 2020, and then feedback was incorporated into the proposed model. There was then an endorsement period in 2021. Feedback was again incorporated into the model, and that information is actually documented, and I'll show you in just a second. And then after that, in this spring, the model was then approved by SFASAC to be then pushed forward to CCIC and voted upon there, which brings us to where we are now. So for a full list of the changes on the various feedback, there are multiple pages of changes and feedback. These have been they were submitted as part of our next week proposal. And this information has been out online for quite a while, but you can click this link. This presentation will be posted in the webinars page at the end of this presentation. These links are all active and you can go out there and see these documents. So where are we today? So after all this time, why are additional changes to governance being considered? There's a lot of factors, as Dr. Maduko's already said. First of all, we have new CT state leadership under President Maduko. There are a number of things that were originally planned for CT state that we're relooking at and pivoting in some cases. And there's been extensive feedback that was gathered from campuses in the months of September and October and actually leading into November in some cases. Department chair impact bargaining has also been taking place. Again, that's with our unions, but that is particularly around department chairs. And that conversation actually opened up additional conversations related to academic structure and the request for returning back to campus-based academic departments, which really isn't part of impact bargaining, but it sort of naturally led to that discussion. In addition, there's also various governance resolutions that have been coming from campuses. Not all campuses have submitted resolutions, and those that have been submitted have varied. But nonetheless, there have been a number of resolutions coming forward with a lot of recommendations in them. So what are the changes? There are a number of them, and we want to walk through them. So first of all, to point out, in that governance process, the area where the changes are taking place are in the curriculum side. There were no recommendations or proposals for changes on the Senate side. So it really was focused on the curriculum flow and the impact and dynamics and dialogue of faculty in the process. So on the left here was the previous approved flow for curriculum governance. On the right is a snapshot of what was one of the more common proposals that came forward or resolutions that came forward from campuses with a multi-step process leading through, starting with statewide discipline councils, leading through faculty senates or senates designated campuses, and then coming to a body of a shared governance leadership council made up of Senate presidents or Senate designees. So there's a number of pieces which from this that we have indeed folded into the revised model. But I do want to point out there are a number of concerns that were also raised. In particular, the notion that a shared governance leadership council as proposed in the revision in the resolutions would be comprised of Senate presidents or designees and not necessarily faculty, which itself should be problematic and concerning to all involved, because curriculum is the primary domain of faculty. That is NETSHE Standard 315. We've always been committed to that. And it seems very problematic if we have a curriculum flow structure that potentially is set up such that non-faculty members are actually making substantive changes to curriculum. That itself is problematic. The proposed models also limit faculty engagement across multiple campuses. There's no clear process for ensuring curriculum alignment among the campuses. And then just the clear fact that the campuses don't all agree on their governance resolutions. Several campuses do agree with this one, but others, some campuses, as Dr. Maduko pointed out, have been fully in support of the original model. And there's been various perspectives in between. So therefore, that brings us to where we have a revised model before us. So the changes in the model are focusing on the stages of the curriculum flow process. And so this is the illustration in the original documentation for curriculum governance. This is the new one. So I'm going to walk you through this slowly. We're going to go piece by piece through this to see where the changes are. But we believe that we've worked through the pieces that many of you have been asking for: more campus involvement, more academic departments on the campuses, different pieces with that. So let me walk through this with you. And again, this PowerPoint, this entire presentation will be posted at the end of this event. So the first stage, this is no change. It's just represented a little bit differently. All curriculum begins with faculty. That is not changing. But for clarification, it does make sense, similar to what was put into the resolutions by a number of the campuses. Statewide discipline councils or local department chairs, program coordinators, academic discipline coordinators, or frankly, individual faculty members can design and submit curriculum proposals. The next step, though, is really important. There must be some sort of statewide discipline council for each program area or each discipline area that then is responsible for aligning curriculum and other things related to the curriculum that need alignment, such as credit for prior learning or AP or CLEP exams, or other things that really are particular to that particular discipline or program. There will now, we have heard you loud and clear, and we are returning back to the notion of campus-based departments. This is a substantive change. The original model was having statewide departments led by associate deans of academic affairs. So we are returning back to campus-based departments. Details around that in terms of department chairs and so forth is still being discussed in impact bargaining and is not going to be included in this presentation, but I'll give a little bit more of a deep dive on this in a later slide. The next piece, the PAC, the Program Area Curriculum Committees. In the original model, this would have been comprised of representatives from the various statewide faculty departments that would have been statewide. Of course, if we no longer have statewide departments, this had to pivot. And so instead, these PACs, there are 6 of them, 1 for each school in the CT state structure. Campuses will each have 1 representative on these program area committees. And again, I will unpack this and walk you through it. There will be opportunities for campus feedback specifically prior to finalization of work by your statewide discipline councils. So there'll be feedback periods where entire departments or individuals or different groups can provide feedback on what the discipline councils are aligning. Once that alignment is completed, those discipline councils will forward that curriculum to the program area committee, but they'll also send copies back to the campus departments to then look at and vote to recommend approval or revision that would then be forwarded to the PAC through the campus's PAC rep. The PAC would then be the body that would negotiate changes with the appropriate discipline council and recommend any negotiation, any changes along the way, not to exceed a month. And then the PAC would then vote to approve or reject at the end of negotiations. And finally, the Curriculum Congress will function as originally planned. So all of these changes have been made in response to the feedback. Some of them are directly taken from the resolutions. Some of them have been taken as ancillary to the negotiations happening related to impact bargaining of department chairs, which is a labor issue, but obviously the discussion around campus-based departments naturally evolved out of that, which is more of a structural issue, which is what we're putting forward here. So again, this is just a summary in a one-shot slide of the curriculum development and approval process after the revisions this fall. Likewise, in the flow for the entire governance process, you'll see that the curriculum box in the very left corner has now reflects the statewide discipline groups and the campus-based academic departments in the structure. Let's do a deeper dive. Let's take an example. So as a hypothetical example, let's say we had a new theater program option. You had a faculty member, a CEO, a representative from a local performing arts center, et cetera, and a campus coordinator who want to propose a new theater option. So how would that look going through this process? So first of all, again, curriculum must begin with faculty. You must have a faculty sponsor in order to develop curriculum. Proposals or concept papers, which we will be providing paperwork and documentation for what that would look like in line with new proposal documentation that's required from the BOR, which, by the way, the reason that they're new is because the Office of Higher Education has additional questions and information that is now required from their level. So it kind of trickles down. So OAG mandates new changes, which requires the BOR to update their documents, which requires us to internally to update ours. So we're working on that documentation that will be coming out in the coming months. So nonetheless, proposals, concept papers will begin with any faculty member, chair, program coordinator, et cetera. And then they do need to be submitted to the statewide discipline council. One thing that will happen in the earlier stages is that they do need to include their fiscal and needs analysis early on, rather than folks doing all this work only to find out that the resources just aren't there to do it. So this way you can help find that information early on. So then if this was a theater program optional proposal, it would then be forwarded to the discipline council that theater would fall under. Now I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. We have a proposal around what those discipline councils would be, and we are going to be looking for feedback. Let me just pause for just a second and just point out one thing. We will be having an open feedback period on this for the next week. There's a form we've created that you'll have an opportunity to submit feedback before this is finalized. So I'll have more information on that in a little bit. So just giving you that heads up. And one of the things we're going to be looking for is on our proposed list of statewide discipline councils that I'll show you in another slide. So again, in this case, the discipline council would be the Performing Arts Discipline Council. That council would do their alignment work, again, working on the curriculum. There would then be a feedback period. The period of time will likely vary between 2 to 4 weeks, although that's something that can be up for discussion. But the point is we want to make sure that there's opportunity for folks to have feedback, and that feedback would then be incorporated, and then the proposals would be updated. At that point, once the discipline council finishes with their work and votes to move it forward, that forwarded document would go then to the Arts and Humanities Program Advisory Curriculum, the PAC, the Program Area Curriculum Committee. A copy would also be sent to the campus Arts and Humanities departments. So if we look at that, during the feedback period, each campus would have some sort of Arts and Humanities department, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a slide in a moment. But the campuses would provide feedback prior to the vote by the discipline council. After the discipline council finishes their alignment, it would then be forwarded to the PAC. So in this case, the campus Arts and Humanities departments would vote to recommend approval or revision of the aligned proposals. Those votes would be optional by campus. Some campuses may decide not to vote, other campuses may, but that option is there. And then each campus would have a rep who serves on the Arts and Humanities PAC, and that rep would be responsible for bringing forward the recommendations from that campus. So let's look at the PAC. So the Arts and Humanities PAC in this case, which would be comprised of 12 reps, one from each campus, representing arts and humanities as a whole. So the chair of this case, the Performing Arts Discipline Council, would then present the alignment proposal to the PAC. The PAC would then review the campus recommendations and negotiate changes with the appropriate SDC. In this case, it would be the Performing Arts with that chair. If there were recommendations that needed to be worked in, again, not to exceed a month. And that language, again, was taken from the resolutions that were by the majority of campuses. They would then vote to approve or reject at the end of negotiations. They would forward approved proposals to the Congress. Denials, of course, would be sent back to the SDC for more work. And then information about this would be announced in some manner, some kind of report. The Curriculum Congress. Now, again, the PAC is made up entirely of reps from each campus related to arts and humanities. The Congress is made up of faculty representatives from across all 6 disciplines of CTC. So math and science, arts and humanities, engineering and technology, and others. So this would be the body that has the interdisciplinary from a statewide perspective. And so this group would then look at it, they would go through it. If they have concerns, they would work through those concerns. They would also be working on things, not necessarily your curriculum proposals, but anything else that's curriculum related. Let's say it's general education or a diversity component or something related to curriculum in general, but it's not specific to one particular area of study. That's where the Curriculum Congress comes in for those very deep interdisciplinary discussions. And then, of course, anything resolved by the Congress would move forward to the provost and then on to the BOR for formal approval in the academic council. This is simply a summary slide of all of that information in one screen. That way, for those of you at the end of this who want like a one pager to refer to, all that information is here on the summary. So let me take a moment and explain what this slide is. This is the statewide discipline councils. These are the ones that we are proposing for CT State. Now, in the original discussions that came out of the impact bargaining conversations, where just the idea of campus-based departments started to emerge, there was also a clarification through that discussion about the fact that we do indeed need statewide discipline councils. We both agree. At the time, there was discussion of 24, and I think the 24 was taken because the original planned org structure for CT State had roughly 24 boxes for different statewide departments. But when you really start to unpack the different areas of CT State, you need more than the 24. We have approximately 138 or so official degrees, and then you have about another 100 some odd certificates and so on. So altogether, we've got about 300 certificates and degrees. We can't possibly have 300 discipline councils. So some of these discipline councils have multiple areas that are related, that are in the same bucket, but they're the ones that the folks that we've been working with feel that these are the ones that make the most sense. But we are definitely looking for feedback on these. When you do your feedback form over the next week, this is one of the two things we're looking for feedback on, is specifically these discipline councils. Are they the right ones? Do we need more? Do we need fewer, etc.? So looking at the academic departments, again, the original plan was to have statewide departments with associate academic deans leading them. That has now been revised. We will have campus-based departments with department chairs. However, we have not yet worked out the final details related to academic chairs and so forth. That's part of the impact bargaining process, and we will still continue those discussions. In addition, we need clarification here that the campuses will need to have departments that are organized by the 6 schools of CT State. Now, that said, some campuses may be very large and need to break into more than the 6, and some might be smaller and want to have fewer than the 6, but they need to at least be structured around the 6 that are in CT State so that curriculum and other things are going into the right channels. But we will work with the campuses to figure out what is the right structure for each one. And to be clear, each campus potentially will have a different structure. We're not doing one size fits all, but we just need to make sure that those departments do align with the schools of CT State. Again, the reason for these changes, obviously, we want to increase faculty involvement locally in the curriculum development process. We want to maintain campus identity and culture, ensure local representation, and address local needs. So the PAC, a little bit of a deeper dive on this. Again, as a reminder, the PAC's purpose is to streamline curriculum development by addressing curriculum issues across each school or program area prior to being forwarded to the Congress. So that way, all campuses have an opportunity to look at through a lens of arts and humanities, or all campus through a lens of business and hospitality, prior to going to Congress, where it's interdisciplinary across the entire state. So that's where the PACs come into place. The membership is entirely made up of voting members of faculty, with an ex officio member being the CT State academic dean related to that program area. So, for example, the Dean of Arts and Humanities is Dean Brad Baker. The Curriculum Congress, again, the purpose is to conduct an interdisciplinary review and approval of proposals for CT State, clearly to honor the standard that curriculum is the primary domain of faculty, to streamline the process of curriculum development, to address statewide curricular issues and have collaboration across the campuses and across the 6 schools of CT State, and to ensure we have aligned programs and courses for a single catalog. So the Curriculum Congress membership, I want to point out the items that are on this slide in red are changes that were made to the model prior to this fall. So this was based on feedback prior in 2021. So the membership is 33 elected members. That went up from 27 in the original proposal. There are co-chairs in here. One of them must be a faculty member. But Congress, if you'll notice, is comprised of 24 faculty members. That is 4 faculty from each of the schools. And so this will be a statewide body. And so there'd be faculty from each of the 6 schools and 6 areas of CT State. There is a note that is in the Curriculum Congress requirements that was already part of the approved structure, that if there is a campus that does not have representation across the Curriculum Congress by some manner, then that campus would vote to recommend a non-voting member to be added to this body just to ensure communication with the campuses. But there's a very good chance between having 24 faculty members and 6 non-faculty CCP members, one from advising, one from registration, one from the library. One CCP would direct curricular responsibilities. So let's say a program director who is a CCP, but perhaps not a faculty member, and then 2 at-large members, and then 3 students from the SGAs. Now, the language in the Congress documentation is that you have a student from each region. Obviously, we no longer have regions, so perhaps we have one from large, medium, and small colleges instead. And this is where the provost or designee would be the ex officio member. The other portion, the parallel structure of governance in the non-curriculum side of things, this remains unchanged, but just a quick look at that. So the campus, you have your campus senate bodies. This is for the main forum for discussion of non-curricular issues that impact each campus locally. There's a lot of things that could come into place. Events and scheduling, standards or policy recommendations, services, resources, initiatives, a variety of things on campuses, just not related to curriculum. And so that's unchanged. Each campus has whatever structure they have. And of course, their CEOs serve as ex officio members of those bodies. And then there's the College Senate for the entire state. This is the forum for statewide non-curricular issues. Things like the statewide events, the calendar, scheduling issues, same thing, but just statewide. And this is the composition of Senate. Again, the changes here that you see in red were made in 2001. They are not changes that were made here in this fall. But this is where you have equal representation from each campus. There's 1 faculty member representative. There's 1 professional staff classified member. There's 1 non-management at-large member from each campus and 3 students. And this is where the CT state president is the ex officio member. So just to recap in summary, I know that there was a lot of information we went through, but if you just want to get to the meat, just to bring it all together, you've got this slide that illustrates the entire governance process with the revision included. This slide, which is the revised curriculum development and approval process. And then our last next steps. So the timeline between September and November is when all this feedback was gathered, campus visits took place, there have been governance resolutions as we talked through. Today is the webinar. A week from today, we're going to have, there's a feedback form. If you go to our ctstate.edu/webinars page, the feedback form is available, and a copy of this presentation will be posted at the end of this event for you to go back and go through and digest more slowly. But we will be gathering feedback from you for the next week on 2 things, the model itself and the proposed statewide discipline councils. So those are 2 different things that we'd like you to provide feedback on. By the end of the month, November 30th, we will have that feedback and changes incorporated into the model, at which point Dr. Madugo will be finalizing the model and sharing it with the state. Then we need to do elections and stand everybody up, because we need to ensure that by spring, we have operational governance bodies. So what we're asking for is that elections, that nominations for statewide governance bodies would be submitted by December 9th, and that elections would all be resolved by the 23rd. To be clear, almost all of the elections will be entirely on each campus. The only one that needs to be a statewide election is for the Curriculum Congress, where you have faculty representatives and CCP representatives across the state. So that one will have to be a statewide election, which we'll be doing through an anonymous SurveyMonkey platform. All the other elections are conducted within your campus to determine who your representatives will be. That way, when we return in the spring, January is when we return, February and March, those bodies will finalize their bylaws. Some groups will be up and running quite quickly, others might need a little bit more time. And then hopefully by March, April, and May, those governance bodies will be operational. And of course, they'll move forward. Now, that said, the governance model will be open for review By the language that was already put into the governance structure, the plan was supposed to have been reviewed upon 2 years of operation and then every 5 years thereafter. Of course, that timeline can change as needed. So we do have some FAQs and so forth. We're going to have live questions in the chat. I just want to go through a couple of quick ones going through there. So first of all, how does this plan address both local and statewide concerns? So clearly, it helps address all the things I had in that very first slide. Why statewide and why local? It makes sure that we have a single accredited institution operating as one. We have a single catalog, aligned programs, etc. The remainder of these questions are the actual questions from the resolutions that some campuses have submitted. So we thought it was important to address the specific questions that your campuses have asked. So the first one is, how does the plan avoid gridlock given the number of shared governance bodies reviewing the curriculum proposals? So to be clear, the SDCs and the campus academic departments will consider proposals in a timely fashion, according to whatever the faculty are submitting and the needs of the curriculum. Curriculum always has ebbs and flows as needed. The PACs will then review and address curricular issues across the campuses within each school, so that we make sure that anything related to arts and humanities or what have you is addressed, and then you get to your interdisciplinary review across the state. And of course, curriculum must be proposed, modified, and approved by faculty. So another question asked in the resolutions, how does the plan ensure adequate representation for campuses of various sizes? So again, the discipline councils will be comprised of one faculty rep from each campus where discipline programming is available. We know that there'll be multiple programs represented in some of these SDCs, but we can't have, hundreds and hundreds of people in these SDCs if we only have dozens and dozens that are actually full-time faculty on a campus. So we have to have some areas like performing arts that are sort of collapsed. So each campus would have a representative that would then be responsible for liaising with the various program coordinators that oversee those programs. Academic departments will be campus-based and may vary by campus, but they'll align with the CT state schools. They'll be engaged. The PACs will be comprised of one rep from academic departments on each campus. And of course, the curriculum congress will be comprised of reps from faculty and CCP staff, as well as students across the state. Another question asked, how are recently hired faculty members who do not have the benefit of AR compensated for service and shared governance? So just to clarify, workload is not part of governance. Workload is something that's subject to collective bargaining. And we know that gets kind of blended into these conversations, but it's important that we keep them separate. That said, the union contracts have language related to AR and release time for folks. All the guidelines are laid out. But what I will tell you, we are working on guidance related to recommended AR and release time for service on the statewide bodies during this coming spring and the coming academic year. We'll be working to get that developed. We want to ensure consistency across the state, and that'll be shared once finalized. But of course, that involves discussions with your leadership. So we need to make sure that takes place. Another question, the discipline council in my area has been very effective in considering and proposing curricular changes. Would this plan maintain the councils? In some cases, some groups would be maintained and others would be formed as new SDCs. It all depends on the group and what the scope is. But nonetheless, these statewide discipline councils will be responsible to align your curriculum across multiple campuses. And then lastly, can each local shared governance body make or add amendments to a proposal? If so, would these amendments cause gridlock? And again, with this new revised proposal or revised plan, there are opportunities for local faculty members and campus departments to provide feedback prior to alignment through the SDCs and as well as after. Once the SDC says they've aligned a program, those campus departments would then vote to recommend approval or revision, and those recommendations would be forwarded to the PAC. All 6 PACs would also be comprised of representatives from the campus academic departments. So there should be ample opportunities for local faculty departments to recommend changes. All right, so I'm going to stop there. The remainder of this time is going to be opened up. I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Meduco, and I believe one of our AVPs, Tam O'Day-Stevens, Dr. Stevens, she is going to help facilitate questions that are in the chat. So please go to the chat to put them in. I can't see them, so she'll have to share them. And likewise, the feedback form It's online. It's at the ctstate.edu/webinars link. Please feel free to go there. We're asking for deadline for next week. We want to make sure that there's ample time to incorporate the feedback and then conduct elections so that these governance bodies can be functional for the spring. So thank you very much. I am going to, I guess I'll stop sharing, but I want to make sure everybody knows that you go to the chat to answer the questions.
Yeah, hey, Dr. Lapierre, Director, thank you so much. That was a lot of information. So as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, right? The links are live in terms of where you can access the actual revised governance structure. 1 week to allow our colleagues across the state to review, to ask questions, provide changes, recommendations. So again, we want this to be transparent. We want to hear from you. And before we start the Q&A, I really want to stress, as we are working hard and diligently to become CT state, we currently don't have a governance structure. And I recognize there are a lot of people, including the administrators, who are like, we should have done X, Y, and Z years ago. Like, I get that. And there are a lot of people who did participate in the process and did put in the work. My stance and what I glean is we can't go in the past and change anything, right? We can't get that time back. But what we can do is move forward together. And hopefully today has demonstrated that not only did we receive recommendations, not only did we incorporate many recommendations and even during the impact bargaining process, right? Remember, department chairs were not a part of the equation, right? And when I joined and when I heard the concerns, and trust me, I get emails from everyone, and that was a topic too, not only governors but the department chairs. Right? We recognize we have to put that back on the table, right? Right, because local autonomy, local input matters, right? We're not trying to erase or dissolve the history and legacy of our 12 community colleges. Is actually a part of our strength. But then lastly, our faculty across the state that are either a part of career programs, a part of accredited programs, or simply just on campus or interdepartmental discussions. There are changes that our faculty actually want to make, either from their own will or things that are mandatory and obligatory by a post board, by a nursing accreditor, by the board of nursing, what have you. And right now, we can't make those changes, right? So there are things that we have to do, right, as colleagues across the state to stand up our governance. But the beautiful thing about governance, and especially what was proposed, is that the votes are in the hands of our faculty, right? As president, I don't have a vote as it pertains to curriculum. Our provost does not have a vote as it pertains to curriculum, right? The individuals, the colleagues, the bulk of the votes come from our faculty that are represented across programs and disciplines and more importantly, the 12 colleges, right? And we felt that was really important. I think two, there are provisions within the revised governance structure that if recommendations to change the governance structure, right, comes forward, right, that within 2 years, those changes can actually be adopted, right? So again, this is not to remove power from anyone. It's to put power in the very people that are the stewards of our curriculum and at the end of the day are driving instruction across the state. And then lastly, this is a we thing, right? I'm not building governance, and administration is not building governance. Like, we are building governance. And are we going to have it perfect? No, we're not. Right. But it's going to be active. There's going to be engagement across the state. There's going to be engagement on the campus level. The campuses, the colleges will have a voice, and there are mechanisms for those opinions, those recommendations, those revisions, what have you, to be brought forward. Right. So I hope we did a good job to make that clear. But again, there's going to be a week period for your voice to continue to be a part of this process. So I really want to thank our provost, our deans, our AVPs, members of the cabinet, but more importantly, all of the colleges, right, that put their name on the paper, on a resolution, reached out to me directly saying, Duco, I got some concerns. I got an idea. We have recommendations, and we did our best to incorporate all of that. So let's start the Q&A session. We have additional administrators on this webinar so they can lend their expertise and knowledge to address any questions or concerns that are brought up. So Dr. O'Day Stevens.
Thank you, Dr. Medico. First question that came through in the chat. Could you please explain the difference between a committee, the council, and Congress?
I'll take that one to kind of kick it off, but other folks can jump in as well. I think it's just a matter of just the way that the names have evolved over time. So, you've got the Congress, which is made up of folks across the different areas of CT state that are in the Congress area. The statewide discipline councils, I think that word, that phrase evolved out of the impact bargaining discussions when there was some discussion about academic departments, and that kind of evolved out of that. Yeah, so I don't think there's any intention there around committee, council, or Congress. It's just the names have evolved over time.
Thanks, Maya. Next question. Will the statewide discipline council be groups that are already in place, like CCET, CMAC, ESOL, or will they be new groups that will be formed?
I'm going to ask our academic deans to talk about that. They were intimately engaged in creating a list of statewide discipline councils by area.
I can start it off, Maya. So we did have a lot of feedback from many faculty and many disciplines over the course of the past 6 months to a year when the original groupings had come out, where individuals felt that they should be aligned with other disciplines. And we hope we took all of those into account when we created these new groupings. So we are open to feedback. We would love to hear if folks feel that there are better ways to group individuals, but we feel pretty confident that there were a lot of voices who came forward and we collected all of that feedback. The various academic deans have also been going out to the campuses and to the colleges, speaking to faculty, and have gotten some feedback one-on-one with some of those meetings as well. So those are how they were developed.
Thank you, Amy. The next question that came through the chat, do changes need to be approved by the department chairs or program chairs first before going forward?
To be clear, the alignment work will happen in the statewide discipline councils. So any recommendations or feedback that needs to happen has got to go through those discipline councils to do those alignment. And of course, chairs, program coordinators, and others can engage in that process and provide that feedback. The loop back to campuses is to make sure that there's a closing of the loop, that once a department, the statewide discipline council does go through and make their recommendation of an aligned program, that departments are aware of it. And at that point, they may still have additional recommendations or changes that they want to suggest, at which point they would be then forwarded to the PAC for consideration. And again, the PAC would then work with that discipline council chair to incorporate those changes as appropriate.
Thank you. Next question, where do interdisciplinary and interprogrammatic proposals go within this model?
I know it seems like I'm answering all the questions, so other folks can jump in as well, but interdisciplinary, again, faculty are going to work within whichever group they're in, but obviously if you have a multiple disciplines, you're going to engage multiple discipline groups in that work. So that work would likely come through parallel in both of those discipline groups. So let's say you had a science and an English group that were coming together for a particular project. They're going to have to come through their respective groups to get that buy-in and feedback along the way before it obviously gets to the statewide interdisciplinary, which would be the Congress.
Thank you, Maya. Next question, how will special topic courses be handled within this structure?
Amy or the deans, do either one of you want to take this? We do have special topics, and I apologize, don't remember what the new number is in the 4-digit numbering scheme. It used to be 298 or 299, where we have special topics that will exist, where local campuses will be able to have courses that don't necessarily have to go all the way through the formal process of statewide alignment to kind of kick the tires of different things. We'll have more guidance around that. That'll be more clear, in the coming months as this gets stood up. But there are things too that perhaps not every answer or every question has an answer yet on some of these issues. And that's where we want to make sure that Congress has an opportunity, or Senate has an opportunity to think about those questions and come up with a response on behalf of the governance structure. You know, we don't want to put too much structure here, because this is where some of these issues need to be taken up by the governance bodies.
There were about 3 different people that asked this question. How and when will these bodies meet? What will be the time commitments estimated? And can someone please speak about compensation and AR related to these responsibilities and commitments?
Yeah, so again, that was one of the questions that was asked in the FAQ section that some of the campus resolutions put forward. And I want to just again remind folks that workload and compensation is separate from governance. And so they should not be kind of intertwined. That said, I recognize that people want to know. We want to make sure that there's consistency, because traditionally additional responsibilities or release time for those folks who don't have additional responsibilities, it's the mechanism's release time. We want to make sure that folks are getting compensated in a consistent and equitable way. So we're going to be putting together guidance with a bunch of folks in the coming weeks to answer those questions. But in terms of when they would meet in the spring semester, we're going to be reserving the Friday time period for statewide governance meetings, virtual meetings that will be set up on a schedule. And so other things like discipline councils and so forth, that is up to those groups to figure out when they're going to meet and so forth. But they need to make sure that they have at least a monthly meeting, for example, to make sure that they're getting things through a process in a timely manner. But we're not going to micromanage all of these groups. The major groups, the Congress, the Senate, and the PACs will have formal meetings on those Fridays of each month in a virtual format with more information to come. On November 30th, when the information about the model is finalized, there'll be more information about the schedule for the spring as well.
Thanks, Maya. What are your expectations in terms of how long it will take for a change or a new program to get through this process?
Nobody else wants to jump in. So it varies. Just like now, a course or a program could take 2 or 3 months. It could take 6 months. You know, it depends on the situation, the scenario. I would argue that this process, even though it might look like there's additional steps than you might have in your local governance, I believe that this process will be much more streamlined than what was proposed previously. You know, and so that problems or issues, hopefully there's enough rigor and enough folks looking at this and enough faculty engaged at the earlier stages. So as it makes its way through the governance process, there are less roadblocks throughout the process. So, you know, the time is subject to change, but just as a reminder, no matter what, all changes to curriculum have to be done in a manner that they're not going to be instantaneous. They have to be in place for the next catalog and the next catalog term. So there's always a moment in time that just forces it, no matter how quickly you get through the process, it still has to sit on the shelf until the next catalog comes out.
Along with that question, Maya, there was a question about if it was a modest degree change, adding or substituting a course or changing a prerequisite, might there be a fast track that would not involve all the people on the committees and Congress?
I would say that that would be one of the first topics that the Senate and Congress should be taking up to develop. You know, I believe what we've been tasked with doing here is to revise the governance structure to put a structure into place for CT State. But there's a lot of these types of issues that I think are really important and necessary. And that's where I would task and charge those bodies that are formed to answer those questions.
Next question. What are the implications of these changes for assessment, program review, and accreditation? And will these functions be managed by the SDCs?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, anything that's related to a statewide consistency or alignment around your program should be going through your SDCs, through statewide discipline councils. So something like, let's say, program review, as a tool for program review in general, in part, that's coming down to us from the BOR. But in part, that would be something that I would say is something Curriculum Congress would take on because it really impacts all program areas. It's not subject to a specific one. But if you were talking about, let's say the math folks want to go in and use a particular tool to assess a math, well, that's for that discipline council to engage in and to engage with the campus bodies that they're representing. So that's where I think it varies depending on the kind of work that's happening.
The next question, it says, how are faculty senates and councils included in this model? This will ensure interdepartmental and interdisciplinary bodies.
So as a reminder, all curriculum for CT State is statewide. It is a single catalog for the state. So the curriculum structure must have the statewide engagement. So campus-based curriculum bodies are not happening. It's campus-based academic departments, and certainly you could have interdisciplinary discussions with your colleagues, and they can bring that curriculum through their statewide discipline councils. But it's important to note that while we have campus-based academic departments, per the request and strong feedback from the campus, and we recognize that, the curriculum is still statewide, and it must happen statewide. So all folks have the opportunity to provide feedback during those feedback loops, whether you're on a campus body or a campus senate body, or you're an individual faculty member, you can all provide that feedback during that feedback loop.
How would decisions about general education and learning outcomes, including diversity, be made in this process? This was only mentioned as an issue for the Curriculum Congress, but how could discipline and campus level faculty be able to give input on these issues before they reach the Curriculum Congress?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that folks want to initiate can be brought up to the Congress. It doesn't have to start at the Congress for something along those lines. And I would say certainly gen ed, diversity, those types of issues are something that should start, in an individual faculty's office where they have a question and they bring it to their campus body and they bring it to their SDC and it makes its way up. Those are absolutely different channels to get that information forward. And I would suggest, of course, that those folks that were on the Congress, if something like that came forward, that before they're making decisions, that they would turn around and engage their campuses and engage the 12 to get feedback around whatever the major issue is.
Are adjuncts able to participate, especially in the arenas where there aren't any full-time faculty or disciplines?
I would defer to those Senate bodies and Congress bodies to lay out those details, the finer points around governance and those types of things. In the initial structure, it's full-time faculty, but I do think there's opportunities for part-time, but that's something that those governance bodies are going to have to clarify.
There's a couple questions that have come in the chat, Maya, about the time frame of when people were given the opportunity to give feedback. I know you had a slide on that as far as the process. I don't know if you could share that again with the group. There was about 5 questions with that.
Yeah, if you give me a moment, I will be able to share it. Just hang on a second.
And then the other question that came in was, will students have input in decision making? And I don't want to not ask that question because I think that's very important.
Yeah, so first of all, here's the screen on the timeline. I'll leave that up there, and we'll have this information also. Again, this presentation will be posted online, so we'll be able to see this information. And of course, both the Congress and the Senate have voting members that are from the student SGAs, 3 students on the Congress and 3 students on the Senate. But of course, there should be feedback even coming through the pipe. I would think that anybody who's proposing curriculum would be talking to students and getting their feedback in that process anyway.
Thank you for that, Maya. I think we have time for maybe, you want to go over this?
Sharing if that's okay.
Yes, please. Thank you. I think we have time based on the webinar for one more question. I think there was a lot of questions in the chat about the time frame of a week and why does this need to be stood up so quickly? So I wanted to get that in there because there was about 5 questions about that.
And Maya, we can tag team that one. So I don't want to use the word quickly, but it feels quickly. And yeah, it feels quickly to me too. we have to stand up governance, right? So per our work with NETCHI, per their standards, per our updates that we're providing, you know, we have we have articulated that we will stand up governance, right? That it's a significant component of any institution that's accredited by NETCHI, and that's something that we want to abide by and be compliant with. I think two, again, we want these bodies to be in full operation, right? Upon the elections, and also for us to kind of get familiar and acclimated to this new governance structure. And then three, there are programs, there are courses that require changes, have it be from our faculty, per their advisory boards, per the industry, per a regulatory body, and we want to make sure that we're being compliant and receptive, to those recommendations and directives. So it's a lot of reasons, and I know it feels like a rush, right? But like this is significant. Governance is at the core of who we are, and it is a tool that should be available, should be stood up, for our faculty and voting members.
Thank you, Dr. Maduka. And I want to reiterate what you said. The last point in particular, we have a significant inventory, if you will, of curriculum matters that are sitting in hold until governance is up and running. There are a number of groups that have been operating collaboratively all this time and have things they want to move forward, program options they need to bring forward, things that did not get through the transitional process that are literally sitting in hold. And we want to make sure that those changes are reflected before the catalog is finalized for the fall of 2023. So we must have these governance bodies up and working. We recognize they may not be 100% in the best formation, the way that everybody would love them, but we need to make sure we have something that's up and operational and functional. And then those bodies themselves can look at their model, look at what's being done, look at open questions and make those decisions and really start shaping the future. It's just really important that we get this, we get folks into those seats and get the work going.
I think we were at time, Maya, so
Gotcha.
I wanted to reflect, that it was 4:32, and I know there's a bunch of questions that were not gotten to. They have been recorded, and I believe that we will be responding to those on the fact page. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And just as a reminder, please go to the website ctstate.edu/webinars. We will be posting this presentation shortly. It'll take a little while to get it out there, but there is a form out there already with two questions. One is, what's your feedback related to the revised model? And the other, for those of you in the faculty areas, what is your feedback related to the statewide discipline councils? So again, that information will be posted so you can go through this at your leisure and kind of walk through the steps. And we'll also have a recording of this posted as well, but it does take a little bit of time to get that stuff up there. Thank you.
And then Tam and Maya, I'll just wrap it up. Again, thank you to everyone, right? I love chat rooms, so trust me, I'm reading every comment and keeping a straight face. But again, we welcome candor. We want people to be blunt. We want people to feel comfortable that they can speak their truth, right? Share their take without being reprimanded or ostracized. Like we support that. We support not only providing transparency, but we want our folks to be transparent with us. I think two, I think we all can agree woulda, shoulda, right? There should have been more time. We could have done things differently, but we can't change any of that. How do we collectively move forward, right? How do we stand up, CT State? And then when we become CT State in the summer of 23, we're going to continue to recognize things that we're going to have to address. So the work is not going to be done come July 1 of 2023. We're going to be in continuous improvement, building this institution that we believe, and I believe, that's really going to be not only the most affordable and most accessible institution of higher education in the state of Connecticut, but really raising the bar of what higher education can be. Community colleges, we are a powerhouse, always have been. And now we get to impact and serve the 169 communities in Connecticut and beyond. And I think those stakes and that opportunity, like this is a place that I want to be in, but we have to sharpen ourselves. And that comes from our faculty being honest and our staff, and even being even disagreeing with each other sometimes and fighting in order to, out of debate, formulate something that works for everyone. So again, I really thank everyone for your input. We're not here to silence anyone. More to come, but we look forward to your feedback and your questions and your additional recommendations so we have the ability to stand up governance. So again, have a good night. Happy whatever day it is. And thank you.